Okay, let me ask a question that might seem a little bit simple. However, the answer may not actually be. When we write about Friday Night Lights, what are we writing about? Sierra, when you write about Friday Night Lights in this class, what are you writing about? Give me an answer. Just try one. I'm sorry? Well, I can't write about anything, because if you were writing about Friday Night Lights, I wouldn't write about Montag burning books, right? So you got to narrow that a little bit. What are you writing about? Tell you what, I'll give you a hint, Sierra. Look at your topic sentences. Look at those claim sentences. Those claim sentences that you write always focus on the same thing. They always carry the same subject grammatically. You've been doing a good job. You've been writing the sentences that I've been asking you to write. So what does every one of those sentences focus on? Thank you. Yes. Very good. So you are writing about Bissinger every time. Every one of your topic sentences is focused on him as the subject of your sentence. Not Movie Miles, not Ethos, not Friday Night Lights, but Bissinger. You have been writing about how Bissinger does something in the context of this book. Gone are the days when you could just summarize a book. So in elementary school, when you did a book report, nobody asked you to pay attention to the author and the author's style. They only asked you to pay attention to the characters in the book, beginning, middle, ending, and so on, and just summarize it. But we're at a level above that. What we're doing is considering what Ray Bradbury told us, that this is the artificial construction of a single human mind. Bissinger has put pen to paper or finger to keyboard, what have you, and he has written Friday Night Lights. And what we're trying to understand is what he's doing and how he's doing it. This is the what he's doing, and this is the how he's doing it. Every one of your writings for this class has been an effort to say, what is Bissinger doing? And that could be, Derek, one of the three answers to that question with the what he is doing. What are our three levels of analysis on what? Very good. And ethos refers to what? Use a non-Greek term for me there. Nope. I mean, yes, they're related to ethics, but what do we understand ethos to be? It's okay to look in your notes if you have any. Jojo. No, actually, and this is the trick, because ethos has the E, it starts it often looks like emotion. Which one, Jojo, was emotion? Very good. Okay, so we might be looking at emotion. And we look at emotion, we're looking at the pathos claims. We're looking at ethos. Peyton, what are we looking at? Motivation, identity, value. So we're looking at the author, and we're looking at the author's identity. We're looking at whether that author is credible, issues of the author. The last one that you were introduced last week, Jake, logos. And what does that mean? True. But what are we looking at when we look at the logos level of what?
Like how something makes sense with like proving it.
You're really close. You're getting to it. I think you've got the right idea. Let's see if we can articulate it a little bit clearer. Zach.
What the author is trying to prove.
What the author's trying to prove. What statement, what fact or opinion he's trying to prove. So he's trying to explain or prove something. And that is logos. So when we talk about Friday Night Lights, we're talking about three levels of what? What is he doing? He's trying to create an emotion. He's trying to build his own identity. Or he's trying to prove something. Yesterday, you focused a little bit on the how through that rhetorical devices lecture. And unfortunately, the answer to the how is nowhere near as easy as the answer to the what. For the what, we have three levels. Very simple. And we can focus on those. However, with the how, we have a number more than three levels. In fact, let's start listing how many hows we have. Where is that? Ah. So when I talk about the devices, I'm talking about writer's tools. What tools does Bissinger have in his toolbox that he uses? Tamara, give me one of the tools that we've discussed that he uses, one of the devices. Inner monologue, excellent. So this is an invitation into the thoughts and feelings of one of the characters from the inside. Lindy, give me a second one. Imagery. Keep it going. Derek. Stats. Good. By the way, I use stats on the board. Please, in your writing, use statistics. I'd place shortcuts here. In formal writing, make sure you're not. Jeff, did you have another one? Oh, good. Italicize or all caps fonts. Look through your writings. That's why they're on your desk. Find some others. Lindy. Repetition. Repetition's a wonderful writer's tool. Everything from journalistic articles to poetry uses repetition. Give me more, Jeff. Slang. One that you might have learned about yesterday. I might intentionally use slang. Austin. Profanity, good. And profanity could be a type of slang. By the way, profanity and slang are both considered what type of language? I think it was discussed yesterday in the lecture. I'm sorry? Thank you, Jeff. Look at that. Profanity and slang are both considered levels of informal language. Give me more. You've got them on your desk. Or you took some notes on them yesterday. You have written on these. We've talked about profanity. And by the way, we could subdivide profanity if we wanted to into racist language, as many of you have focused on. Austin. Jargon. And Austin, what was your definition of jargon? Did you get what that was?
Language which invites the listener to be part of a specific group or community.
Yeah, so technical language. So if I'm talking technical football terms, can people throw out some technical football terms? I'm sorry? PAT. I guess that's technical if I have no clue what you're talking about. So if you throw out PAT and I'm clueless, that means I'm not part of the community that uses that. I don't know the technical football jargon. All right, Tamara, you had your hand up for another one. Dialogue. These are merely some. I can't give you an all-inclusive list because it's too big. As freshmen, you should have studied some of the literary devices and techniques that fictional authors use. Metaphor, simile, symbolism, allusion, dialect, the different levels of characterization, and so on. That was a relatively restricted list. In other words, it was small. Compared to the number of tools that writers have out there, it was small. Your task as an analyst is to pick one of these three on the what and try to determine that how. Sometimes the how will be obvious. And you guys have been focusing on obvious devices, and that's where you should start. Profanity is a pretty obvious device. It jumps off the page. So a lot of you start with profanity and talking about Friday Night Lights because it's so easy to deal with. Imagery, really easy to deal with. Statistics, very easy to deal with because numbers jump off the page. Inner monologue, something a little bit more complicated and required me explaining to you what was going on there. However you do it, at some point, you're going to need to stop depending on me to tell you what the device is and determine that for yourself. What is it exactly that I'm reading on the page? Let me talk to you about what you've done with these writings. Here is, and I'm sorry that Chance is not here today because here's his. And I put it up on the board because it's what I consider to be an excellent example of very solid writing here. I want you to take a look at your rhetorical analysis. That's the one that you did in class. It's the piece of paper with a little rubric slip stapled to the top. This is Chance's. I want to talk about how he's taking this analytical method and doing well by it. Okay. First of all, he has followed my instructions in writing his topic sentence. In the chapter The Watermelon Feed of Friday Night Lights, he even added both chapter and book title, which is excellent. H.G. Bissinger uses a simile to express the racial population of Odessa. All four parts, title, author, device, effect. I said the effect was a little bit unclear. I'm not sure what he's expressing about the racial population of Odessa, but his device is clear. The structure of that sentence is clear. That's step one. That's what I'm looking for. And that's why I've asked you in your groups and individually to write so many of those. He's following that format. The simile is, and then there's his example. The simile is almost all of those in the crowd were white and their faces had a certain flattened, non-frilled look like the land in which they lived. Is it a simile? Sure. We've got some comparison going on there. The statement just stresses the fact that Odessa is predominantly white. So far in the book, Boobie Miles is the only person we know of that's not white, which I mentioned is not true. However, that's not what I'm looking at with this piece of writing. I want you to see exactly what he's doing that's proper. He's writing this sentence, this topic sentence properly. He's introducing his evidence, he's giving his evidence, and then he's talking about his evidence. And his evidence is related to his device. If you say Bissinger's using profanity to shock the reader, what should I see throughout your development? Sean, if your claim is Bissinger is using profanity to shock the reader, what do I expect to see on the page in your development? Right, examples from the book of what? That's right. I expect to see profanity throughout your writing. And if I don't see that, then you don't have examples that relate. Chance has used a simile. It's a quoted simile. And that's excellent. He introduces it. It's not the best introduction in the world, but it's an introduction. This is exactly what I need. The simile is, and there's your simile. And then he talks about it. Sean, second question. I'm going to see profanity on that page. My claim is, in Friday Night Lights, Bissinger uses profanity to shock the audience. What else will I see on the page? I'll see profanity. Give you a hint, Sean. Everything that follows should just be an echo of that topic sentence. In Friday Night Lights, Bissinger uses profanity to shock the audience. I should see words like shock, and I should see an explanation on how it shocks the audience. That's correct. That type of writing, exactly what I explained and what Sean identified, is what I'm looking for. And if you look at the grading rubric on the rhetorical analysis, you'll find that most of those points are devoted to that kind of operation. Give me a topic sentence claim, give me evidence, explain and integrate how it develops your claim. Okay, let's see. Second example. This is Peyton's, and let me, what? You do, most of the time. You do write lightly, and then it's difficult to photocopy, but that's okay, I can deal with it. In Friday Night Lights, H.G. Bissinger develops his credibility as a researcher through the use of statistical evidence. Claire, what's my device? Excellent. Statistical evidence is my device. Carmen, what's the effect? Yeah, that credibility. Very good. Was that pathos, logos, ethos? Nope. Try another one. Remember, developing the identity, the reliability of the writer? That's right. All right. So Peyton's doing well so far. We've got an ethos effect. We've got a device. Remember, in your sentence, the device does not need to come first. Throughout the book, many paragraphs contain statistical evidence that Bissinger has researched. When he states these statistics, the reader starts to believe that Bissinger knows what he is saying and that what he says is the truth. Those two sentences basically restate the claim, and that's fine. Peyton has decided to make sure that she's very clear, so she has two sentences re-explaining the claim, and then she introduces her evidence. Notice what Chance did? And it's pretty funny because you can see the personality of the writer come out in this. Chance didn't put those extra two sentences in there because Chance just gets to the point. So he gives his claim and then he gets right to the evidence. That's fine too. But Peyton takes a couple sentences and then she introduces her evidence. When Bissinger writes, during the show it was pointed out that a $5.6 million high school stadium had been built in Odessa in 1982. It makes a person feel as if he dug through old television recordings to find this fact. Evidence, explanation to credibility. At another point in the book, Bissinger writes, in 1982, the 37 murders that took place inside Ector County gave Odessa the distinction of having the highest murder rate in the country. The more statistical evidence that Bissinger packed into this piece of literature, the more reliable the writing becomes to the reader. Also, putting in evidence like statistics shows that the author is a credible researcher by giving evidence of his work. It's simple and it's formula. In other words, it's not creative writing. Peyton, exceptional as a writer as she is, has done nothing independent, creative, or magical. Let me show you exactly what she's done. And what Chance was doing too. She gave a claim. Then she intros her evidence. She gives her evidence. She links that evidence back to the claim. Intro evidence number 2. Give it. The link. You want to write one of these effectively? Follow that formula. And then fill in the blanks. If during an in-class writing, you have another one of these rhetorical analyses, by the way, coming up the week after OGTs, I think. You'll spend another 42 minutes writing one of these. And this time it'll be your own claim, not one that we've discussed in class, so you must come up with something original. If you want to write this well, follow this formula. You already have a formula for the claim. 4-part formula for the claim. You should know how to cite, quote, and paraphrase evidence, whichever you're doing. The intro to the evidence is often establishing background. Let me show you an example in Peyton's. Very simple. At another point in the book, that's not the best background in the world, but she's saying here, later on. That's fine. When Bissinger wrote, she could expand that background if she really wanted to add detail and say, when Bissinger is discussing Odessa and, or no, I'm sorry, it's Watermelon Feed where that quotation occurs, isn't it? The 5.6 million? When Bissinger is discussing the football frenzy that occurs in Odessa around the time of the beginning of the season, he discusses a television show broadcast. He writes during the show, so on and so forth. So if you wanted to add a little bit to it, you could do that. So give me the claim. Introduce the example by possibly giving me a little bit of background on it. Give me the quotation if you're using a quotation and cite it properly, or just paraphrase. Now the links here are the most important part. How does that evidence achieve the effect? How does the $5.6 million evidence achieve that effect? Peyton has explained it looks like he actually went through old television broadcasts. In other words, he did his work. And therefore, it increases his reliability. How does that evidence demonstrate your effect? Megan, in your rhetorical analysis, the one that you wrote in class, what was your claim? Your first sentence.
My claim was I noticed that Messenger uses imagery to develop helplessness and attitude.
Excellent. Look at that. Imagery. Mood of helplessness. Very good. All right. Can you give me an example, Megan, that you used? You don't have to read what you got, but what was one of your examples of imagery in that paragraph? No, what the example of imagery? Do you have any quotations, perhaps? What's your evidence? Speak up. Oh, the flu epidemic. Okay. And so you have imagery of the flu epidemic? Megan is not the only student that worked on imagery creating a mood of helplessness or isolation. Who else did? Kennedy, didn't you? What was your claim in your rhetorical analysis? What was one of your pieces of evidence, Kennedy? Mood of helplessness, sadness, isolation. So using imagery throughout the book to convey these negative feelings. And then Megan can follow that up by giving a bit of quotation, because imagery is always best supported with quotation, about the flu epidemic. And Kennedy could follow that up by giving some quoted imagery of Mike's dad dying. Perhaps Mike's dad while he's sitting there in the hospital bed. Somebody have another piece of imagery that comes to mind that expresses the same thing? Lindy.
Like the description of Odessa, and it was in Odessa, it was filled with wild, overcrowded lawlessness, prostitution, diarrhea, bad water, streets that were so deep in the mud that came to boxing, and they called them.
Great. The disease and the mud in the streets. That's excellent. All of this is fantastic. Excellent evidence because it relates directly to imagery and can be very easily explained to convey this mood. So let's talk about Lindy's for a moment. Lindy, do you have a page reference for that?
Uh,
28. Okay, 28 in the big book. If you're following along in the small book, it's 4 or 5 pages into the chapter Odessa. Okay, here we go. Okay, yeah, I've got it right here. With major oil discoveries in West Texas in the early and mid-20s, the boom was on, and Odessa was only too eager to embrace the characteristics that distinguished other Texas boom towns of the period. Wild overcrowding, lawlessness, prostitution, chronic diarrhea, bad water, streets that were so deep in mud that teams of oxen had to be called in to pull the oil field machinery, and a rat problem so severe that the local theater put out a rat bounty and would let you in free if you produced 12 rat tails. It's imagery. It provides a picture, especially the mud in the streets. I can very easily explain how it conveys negative emotions. And here's how I would do it. And this is how I'd write this piece. In Friday Night Lights, I'll just go general. In Friday Night Lights, Bissinger uses imagery to develop negative feelings of isolation and hopelessness connected to Odessa itself. For instance, when Bissinger is describing the social state of Odessa during the oil boom, he writes, insert that quotation, "The imagery of mud in the streets, rat infestations, and disease make the reader feel uneasy, hopeless, and isolated when being in Odessa." This feeling continues when Bissinger, and then I would introduce my second quotation, my second piece of evidence, and then I would integrate it in the same way. And that's one paragraph. And that's done. And that's all you need to do. Pause there for a moment. Is that sort of approach clear? The writing that I was seeing, for the most part, demonstrated an understanding of that approach. But as you take a look at those pieces of writing and you look at my feedback, I'd like you to take a look at something that you don't understand, some piece of feedback that is unclear to you, especially if I remove the point connected to it. I've just spent about 30 minutes or so going over the model, what I expect you to do. I've shown you a couple student examples that show this competently done. So if you're not doing it competently, if you're losing some points, you don't understand why you're losing those points, now's the time to bring it up. Tamara? Oh, understanding of Friday Night Lights. So I've removed a point there. Can you find any comments on the paper? I should have written, not my little mugs codes, but do you see any more full comments? There's something down there at the bottom. Yeah, can you read that for me, please?
You must use more than one example of proving the point.
Oh, excellent. So Tamara is, can you give me your claim, Tamara?
In Friday Night Lights speech, Bissinger uses inner monologue to build sympathy for the boys on his own.
Good. That's her title. By starting with in Friday Night Lights, what has Tamara committed to doing? Derek?
More than one chapter.
Talking about more than one chapter in the entire book. Showing a trend from chapter to chapter. In Friday Night Lights, he's using inner monologue, and it's some sort of connection to the boys, right? Is it an intellectual connection or emotional connection you're going for? Emotional connection. Okay, so we're talking about a pathos claim. Inner monologue and emotional connection. How many examples do you have?
I just used the two inner monologues from Mike Winchell.
But aren't they kind of the same? They're both Mike Winchell and they're both basically at the same place of the book? Okay, so you've got, let's say that's the entirety of Friday Night Lights. You've made a claim about the entirety of it, but you have pulled out a very small slice of it. What I'm removing a point for Friday Night Lights understanding because I'm not saying, Tamara, you don't understand Friday Night Lights. I'm saying you haven't demonstrated understanding of Friday Night Lights. And that comes with a small paragraph like this. At least two examples from two different chapters would help me understand that better. Does that make sense? Okay, so Tamara's done what a couple students did. Found two examples, but they're basically on the same page and removed by a paragraph or so. Make sure that you're spreading your examples. Or, Tamara, what you could also do to help yourself is narrow your promise. Say you're only doing it with Dreaming of Heroes, or you're only doing it connected to Mike Winchell. Next, Lindy. Oh, paragraph integration. Good. Paragraph integration has to do with this, this, this. So, Lindy, I have two basic pieces. Claim, evidence. My paragraph is built on claim and evidence. You've written the claim, you have the evidence. Integration are those sentences that join those two together. So let me go back to the imagery example I was just giving you. I've given the quotation, rats, mud, diarrhea, and so on. And then I have a statement that says, since people commonly associate rats with unpleasant disease and mud with feelings of disgust and discomfort, Bissinger has used this imagery to create those feelings in the reader. It's where I take the evidence and I explain it in such a way that I show how it creates the effect. Does that make sense? Okay, so those are link statements right here. Also, sometimes if people ended right here, they ended with evidence, and there was never any sort of concluding sentence, I might have said the paragraph's not finished. It's not integrated and wrapped up together. So make sure you have those link statements and that concluding sentence. Good? Okay. Next question. They're both excellent questions. Jojo.
In my club, invited it, like, Bissinger uses in a monologue imagery to develop sentences with voice and answers.
Yes.
Did I lose a point because I used, like, both in a monologue?
Yes. For paragraph length, Jojo, I would like one-to-one relationship, one device to one effect. Now, Jojo, as you become more sophisticated with this technique and you write bigger essays and longer pieces, especially maybe junior, senior year, you'll address multiple devices. But usually you keep, to make it easy, in a paragraph, we're going to a one-to-one relationship. If you were to write an essay, you would have a one on one of these sides. So I have 3 devices developing one effect, or I have 1 device developing 3 effects. But I would always focus singularity somewhere. But for the, so when you're writing essays, you might think, oh, I'm going to have a 3-to-3 relationship, 3 effects and 3 devices. That's just too confusing. If you have 3 devices all developing the same effect, that's pretty clear and not a problem for an essay. But here, for paragraphs, I'd like you to stick with the one-to-one. Whoa. All right. Next question, Austin.
You know, like, you do the intro with animation and links, and then you start over and do it again.
Uh-huh.
Same paragraph.
Yes. For this, it would be the same paragraph, unless, Austin, for some reason you found that it was becoming very long. But I'm thinking your claim is 1 sentence. Your intro is probably 1. Your evidence might be 2, and then your links would be 1. So 1, 1, 2, 1. We've got 5 plus 5, 10 sentences. I don't think that's a problem at all for a single paragraph. If you start to expand really long, you've got big evidence, long sentences and many lines, you might think about splitting it. Okay. Next. Okay, like I said, we're going to table this for a moment until you finish with the OGTs, but then once those are finished, we're back at it with more of the same writing and group activities. So hopefully, and I think from my grading of the rhetorical analyses, things seem to be pretty clear from what I'm getting from feedback from you. So let's just keep that up next week, or 2 weeks from now, I should say.